Wisdom praises herself and tells of her glory in the midst of her people. In the assembly of the Most High, she opens her mouth, and in the presence of his hosts, she tells of her glory. I came forth from the mouth of the Most High and covered the earth like a mist. I dwelt in the highest heavens, and my throne was in a pillar of cloud. Alone I compassed the vault of heaven and traversed the depths of the abyss. Over waves of the sea, over all the earth, and over every people and nation, I have held sway. Among all these, I sought a resting place. In whose territory should I abide? Then the Creator of all things gave me a command. My Creator chose the place for my tent. He said, "Make your dwelling in Jacob, and in Israel receive your inheritance. Before the ages, in the beginning, he created me, and for all the ages I shall not cease to be. In the holy tent I ministered before him, and so I was established in Zion. Thus in the beloved city he gave me a resting place, and in Jerusalem was my domain. I took root in an honored people, in the portion of the Lord, his heritage."
Thank you, Wendy. Now, throughout this Christmas period, we're using readings from the lectionary. And those are readings that are used all over the world for each particular Sunday. And this one is from today's readings from Ecclesiastes. And it talks about wisdom, something I think that we can all use at the beginning of this year. I don't know about you, but for me, this new year is a particularly difficult one to negotiate. It seems that with all the troubles of last year, going into this year is like a soldier who comes back from a disastrous charge on the enemy and says to his officer, "Shall we go again, sir?" It's the last thing that we want to do, but we feel that we should screw ourselves up with as much courage as we can and forge into this new year and face whatever it'll bring. No amount of talk about there being light at the end of the tunnel or a new paradigm in the offing really makes much difference to the cold wind that seems to be blowing to us from this new frontier. And it's almost with sickening dread that we look back at last year and all that's happened and then look forward to this next year. It seemed that every month of 2020 brought some new awfulness that has now left us battered and bruised as we come around the corner to do it all again. And without the wisdom that speaks through this reading, it is almost too much. But we do have that wisdom to fall back on. If only we remembered it. It says, "I come forth from the mouth of the Most High and covered the earth like a mist. I dwelt in the highest heavens, and my throne was in a pillar of cloud. Alone I compassed the vault of heaven and traversed the depths of the abyss. Over waves of the sea, over all the earth, and over every people and nation, I have held sway." And it's a comforting thought that wisdom is underneath it all, and that we can rely on her to get us through. Wisdom is really the bedrock of our approach to life. Without it, we sink. With it, we can navigate anything. I always think that it's interesting that in that reading that we had last week from the story of Jesus being brought to the temple to be purified, it ends with the line, "The child grew and became strong, filled with wisdom, and the favor of God was upon him. It's that wisdom that enables us to face anything that comes our way, because we can acknowledge that all things count for good for those that love the Lord. As Walt Whitman said, "In the faces of men and women, I see God. And in my own face, in the glass, I find letters from God dropped in the street, and every one is signed by God's name. I leave them where they are, for I know that others will punctually come forever and ever." Others will punctually come. Bits of wisdom will come to us. But how to navigate the world that brings us both blessings and woes when there seems to be more of one than the other? For me, the key is our own willingness to be changed. So often it's our resistance to what comes our way that gives us our pain. We don't want to change. We want to stay the same, and we want to navigate around the circumstances so that everything can get back to normal, and we don't have to change. But change is really the only sure thing in life. Everything changes around us. And if we're not willing for ourselves to change, then things do get increasingly grim. But if our attitude to life is such that we allow ourselves to adapt and be changed by what comes our way, then living becomes a lot simpler. That lovely quote from the Tao Te Ching, "Nothing in the world is as soft and yielding as water. Yet for dissolving the hard and the inflexible, nothing surpasses it. The soft overcomes the hard. The gentle overcomes the rigid." Everyone knows this is true, but few can put it into practice. Therefore, the master remains serene in the midst of sorrow. Evil cannot enter his heart because he's given up helping. He is the people's greatest help. True words seem paradoxical. And it's not just about adapting to circumstances. Often we do that in the hope that we can stay the same in our adaptation. Now, we have to go further than that. We have to allow events in our life to shape us, to make us something new. We have to allow ourselves to be affected by what happens. That is the soft overcoming the hard. One of the ways that we can see ourselves being affected is through our emotions. That word emotion comes from the two Latin words ex movere, to move out. And our emotions allow us to process what happens to us and move out of the situations that we find ourselves in. Our grief around our circumstances, even our anger, allows us to be changed from within. I'm not very good at that, having had my emotions beaten out of me by the English boarding school system. I've ended up with a traditional English stiff upper lip, but luckily Heather cries for both of us. But not feeling at that deep level makes it more difficult to move on. And the key in going into this next year, I think, is understanding that the trials we have gone through are the things that can shape us for the better if we allow them to. This last year has given us all a chance to be more compassionate, more understanding, less focused on our own trouble with others being in far worse situations. In England in the 1960s, there was a very popular radio program that people used to listen to called So You Think You've Got Problems. We used to listen to it in our house. And the idea is to have stories of people so bad that our problems pale into insignificance. The one-legged man losing his other leg, that sort of thing. And, last year, all of us realized how lucky we were in many ways compared to others in hospitals, in fires, in wars, in danger. We've learnt to see the world's problems, I hope, as being our own problems. We've learnt the value of our democracy, to feel for the persecuted and the marginalized, to realize that the freedoms that we have to move around are very valuable. The freedom we had to embrace, all those we took for granted, and they can't be taken for granted. And we learned that we're all responsible for many of the problems that we faced. Our responsibility as a world that's cultivated the sort of industrialized food chain that's helped bring about the pandemic. Our role in the political uncertainty that the world's seeing at the moment. Our role in the equality, in the inequality that's caused so much unrest. That in some way the fundamental order that exists in the world is showing us that a correction needs to be made in all of our behavior, that we need to be more alive to the effects that our actions have. All these things we've learnt this year. And if we allow these things to change us, then we become something new. And it's wisdom that allows us to do that. It's wisdom that enables us to reflect and change inside rather than to blame and try to make others change. The Tao Te Ching says again, approach it and there is no beginning. Follow it and there is no end. You can't know it, but you can be it. At ease in your own life. Just realize where you come from. This is the essence of wisdom. And the reading we had today from Ecclesiastes points in the same direction. He said, make your dwelling in Jacob and in Israel receive your inheritance. Before the ages in the beginning he created me, and for all ages I shall not cease to be. In the holy tent I ministered to him, and so I was established in Zion. Thus in the beloved city he gave me a resting place, and in Jerusalem was my domain. I took root in honored people, in the portion of the Lord, his heritage. We are the Israel that receives the inheritance of Jacob. We are the Israel that receives that wisdom, because that wisdom lies within all of us. And it is this wisdom that tells us that we can deal with any situation that comes our way, if we're willing to change and not try to control the outcome. As we go into 2021, there will be new challenges. And those new challenges are what makes us new, will change us into becoming more human, more compassionate, more understanding, if we let them. And we know this to be true. None of us are the same person that we were 30 years ago. And all of us would be embarrassed to only have the understanding that we had all that time ago. We've all learnt through experience. We've become better and more whole people because of the circumstances that our lives have been through. And 2021 is going to be no different. But we have to be willing to continue to learn, to continue to change, and to allow ourselves to be shaped by the circumstances that come our way. Because, as I've said before, God comes to us in the circumstances of our lives and asks us to respond to the divine nudging within those circumstances rather than just to react to the circumstances themselves. If we look at this next year as a way of coming closer to God, closer to the divine, to live in union with the divine rather than fighting it, then whatever happens to us is going to be okay. We'll change. We will be refined in the fire. As it says in Isaiah, "Behold, I've refined you, but not as silver. I've tried you in the furnace of affliction." And whatever happens to us, to know that we're held by the hand of the divine is surely enough to see us through. So as we go into next year, let's name it a year of change, a year where we will allow ourselves to be shaped and refined by the circumstances that come our way, both individually and corporately here as the chapel. May we learn from what we've been through last year, and may it teach us to respond in a more loving way this year. May we serve more. May we offer more, so that in the end, we can know that we've obeyed those two great commands from Jesus: to love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, and all your soul, and all your strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. That's the template for the wisdom within us that allows us to be changed and to be shaped by what happens to us. Because our attention is not on ourselves and our own survival, but instead is on the divine within us and our neighbor alongside us. By doing this, we allow ourselves to be changed in a way that enables us to allow the love within us to grow stronger. To resist that change is to weaken ourselves and to make us more brittle. May we go into next year open-hearted and knowing that whatever comes our way, we'll use it to refine us into that more loving human being that we're all evolving into. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that whole thing about being changed by circumstances. I mean, my whole upbringing has, tried to make me grit my teeth and get through circumstances. And it is a whole different ballgame to allow yourself to be moved and changed and altered. But it just seems to me the obvious thing, really.
It does. One thing really touched me in your talk was about the analogy of water, just how softening water is,
Yeah.
and how the invitation to us to be malleable and changeable and moldable, just imagining water going down a river and how it just does what it does and yielding to that. And I found these words this morning that just so hit my spot. To share just a few of them from John O'Donoghue. Let us bless the humility of water, like to be humbled by our circumstances, always willing to take the shape of whatever otherness holds it. The buoyancy of water, stronger than the deadening downward drag of gravity. The innocence of water, flowing forth without thought of what awaits it. The refreshment of water. I just think that the analogy of water is just so helpful going into a new year. Softens the whole experience somehow.
Yeah, we're always sort of, the idea is to make our stamp on the world. But that idea of allowing the world to make its stamp on us. We're both reading the same Iris Murdoch book at the moment, The Green Knight. And Heather pointed out that life was actually a character in the book. And life, the way that life affects these characters in the book is part of the whole thing. And, that idea that life is, we think, well, how do I change? How do I transform? It's always very difficult to think, well, do I think myself into it? But no. If we allow life to come into us and mold us and shape us, then we just naturally change by what comes our way, really, because life is a character in our lives.
Yeah, like our relationship with life, like my relationship with you, it's like something to cultivate.
Yeah.
The other thought I had just these last few days, there's this whole attitude out there of good riddance to 2020.
Yeah.
I just think that's really, really unhelpful.
Yes.
And it grates with me. And, you know, there's so much tenderness and loss and grief and suffering from 2020. And I feel like, you know, both individually and us as a community here, like it's beholden on us in a way to really give space to the grieving of all that was lost in 2020 and to all the horribleness, and to kind of reverently and gently move into 21, not crudely and sort of, you know, that kind of attitude, you know.
Yeah, I think that's great. Thank you.